Hello and welcome to Byju's. Welcome to 2017. And let's look at all the important current affairs issues that we witnessed in the last week. Some of the remarkable judgments witnessed by the Supreme Court. So let's look at all these statements one by one. Which of the following statements would mean forum non-convenience? Recently, a petition was filed in the Delhi High Court. The petition asked the Delhi High Court, do the judges of Jammu and Kashmir High Court also swear in the name of the Constitution of India? Do they also take oath under the Constitution of India? Do they also take oath to uphold the Indian Constitution? The Delhi High Court sent the matter to the Advocate General of the state and also to the central government, asking the views of both the center as well as state governments on this particular matter, despite the fact that there exists something called forum non-convenience. What does that mean? This forum non-convenience is a discretionary power of the courts that allow the courts to dismiss a case where another court or forum is much better suited to hear this case. That means, what is the issue? The issue is a petition was filed in the Delhi High Court asking whether the judges of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court also take oath to uphold the unity, integrity, sovereignty, and the constitution of this country. So instead of filing the case in Jammu and Kashmir High Court, this case was filed in Delhi High Court. Although Jammu and Kashmir High Court was better equipped, well dealt, that this matter should have been referred to that particular High Court. That means this petition, once it was filed in the Delhi High Court decided to hear it, despite the fact that they could have sent this matter to the concerned Jammu and Kashmir High Court, which was better equipped to hear this particular matter. This is something that we call forum non-convenience. And in your prelims examination, you can be asked which of the following statements regarding forum non-convenience are correct. A, B, C, D. The correct answer is that it's a discretionary power that allows the courts in this country to dismiss a case where another court or another forum is better suited to hear that case. So that was issue number one. Let's look at something else. Now we all know what is an ordinance. When the House of the Parliament or the House of the State Legislature is not in session, the Constitution empowers both the President as well as the Governor of a state to promulgate an ordinance. That means these ordinances are just like laws made by the Parliament. But since Parliament is not in session, ultimately we require to legislate on a particular important matter. The Constitution allows President or the Governor to promulgate the ordinance to that effect. Now we know all about ordinance. We know when can ordinance be promulgated, what is the time period. We also know one thing, that ordinances are subject to judicial review. In various judgments of the Supreme Court, for example, in Cooper case, in A.K. Roy case, Supreme Court has said that the promulgation of ordinances by the President or the Governor is subject to judicial review. On what grounds? On the grounds of mala fide. That means if the Governor or the President has promulgated an ordinance in bad faith, then judicial review will come into picture. That means judiciary will evaluate this particular piece of ordinance and ultimately will declare whether this ordinance is constitutional or this ordinance should be allowed to lapse. In a landmark decision, the Supreme Court last week, to be more precise, yesterday, Supreme Court has widened the boundaries of judicial review. Initially, judicial review was applicable. The judiciary would have thought that if the president or the governor is promulgated an ordinance, but there is a malified intention on part of the president or the governor, then Supreme Court or judiciary in this country will strike down that ordinance. But yesterday, the Supreme Court has expanded, has widened the boundaries of this judicial review. How? Supreme Court has said that the courts in this country are empowered. What are they empowered? They are empowered to examine whether the president or the governor was encouraged by an oblique motive to bypass the legislature and promulgate an ordinance. Ordinance. It's a very important feature in our constitution. When either one or both houses of the parliament or one or both houses of the state legislature, they are not in session. In such an extraordinary situation, the Constitution empowers the president and the governor to promulgate an ordinance. That means these ordinances are in the nature of temporary law. Since Parliament is not in session, so we can't have a parliamentary law to deal with such important, urgent situation. So let's have an ordinance, which is the law promulgated by the president or the governor. Initially, the Supreme Court said, way back in the 1970s and also 1980s, that the power of president or the governor to promulgate an ordinance is subject to judicial review on the grounds of mala fide. That means if in bad faith, president or the governor has promulgated an ordinance, we will strike down that ordinance. We also saw repeatedly in Bihar, hundreds of ordinances was promulgated by the governor, and these ordinances were not even tabled in the house. That means every single time the ordinance was made to lapse, then this ordinance was re-promulgated by the governor. That means there was a concerted effort. That means we want to bypass the legislature. We will not table this ordinance in the legislature and we will re-promulgate the ordinance. Supreme Court in Vadova case had said that re-promulgation of ordinance repeatedly without tabling these ordinances on the floor of the house amounts to committing fraud on the Constitution. That means you are committing fraud on the Constitution. You are not subjecting these legislations in the legislature. But now with this judgment, Supreme Court has expanded this power of judicial review. Supreme Court has said not only mala fide, but what we will examine whether president was encouraged by an oblique motive to bypass the legislature and pass an ordinance. That means advice is given to the president. By whom? By the Council of Ministers, by the cabinet. Cabinet gives an advice to the president that, dear president, please promulgate an ordinance to this effect. Now under Article 74 Clause 2, Constitution is clear. The advice tendered by the Council of Ministers to the president cannot be inquired in any court of law. But now Supreme Court is saying we will not go into the advice, but we will go into the material on the basis of which this advice was given to the president. And if this material was not sufficient, if this material did not warrant promulgation of an ordinance, then we will strike down this ordinance. That means not only will the Supreme Court look into the malified intention of the president, but Supreme Court will also examine the documents on the basis of which the advice is tendered by the cabinet to the president that, dear president, you promulgate an ordinance. That means now judiciary is empowered to examine the oblique motive behind the promulgation of this ordinance. Not just this. Supreme Court has said something else. Supreme Court has said repromulgation of an ordinance is committing fraud on the Constitution. In the last webinar, we talked about that for the 5th time, enemy property ordinance was promulgated by the president. Now the Supreme Court has, in a blanket decision, said repromulgation of ordinance is committing fraud on the Constitution. That means placing ordinance before the legislature is now mandatory. Initially, what was happening? The government is in minority in Rajya Sabha, and since both houses of the parliament are required to pass a bill, the government was forcing the President of India to promulgate an ordinance. That means we don't want to face Rajya Sabha because we are in minority in Rajya Sabha. Since we are in minority in Rajya Sabha, this bill cannot be passed. So let's promulgate an ordinance to this effect. Now the Supreme Court has said, you have to place this ordinance when both houses of the parliament will reconvene, reassemble. Then you have to place this ordinance before the legislature. You cannot bypass the legislature. And if you do that, it amounts to abuse of constitutional process. This is a landmark decision, landmark judgment of the Supreme Court of India. And we have seen 3 important judgments of the Supreme Court of India yesterday. One was the Supreme Court's view on ordinance. That means Supreme Court will examine the material on the basis of which the ordinance was promulgated. Supreme Court has said repromulgation of ordinance is committing fraud on the Constitution. Supreme Court has said placing this ordinance before the legislature is mandatory, and the failure to do so would amount to serious constitutional infraction and will be abuse of constitutional process. This was another landmark decision taken by Supreme Court yesterday. Let's look at another issue. Supreme Court also ruled that religion race, caste, community, language, or any of them would not be allowed to play any role in electoral politics. Religion, race, caste, community, language would not be allowed to have any place, would not be allowed to play any role in the Indian elections. What was the matter before the Supreme Court? Supreme Court was examining Section 123, Clause 3 of the Representation of the People's Act 1951. Now you know, Representation of the People Act 1951 is that piece of legislation which governs the overall conduct of Indian elections, whether at the central level or in the state level. This section 123 clause 3 talked about the appeal by a candidate and not only the candidate, even if it's the agent of the candidate, to vote or refrain from voting for any person on the ground of his religion, race, caste, community, or language. Or the use of religious symbols or national symbols. All these things amount to corrupt practice, and anyone who indulges in this corrupt practice will be disqualified. That means the law was clear. Section 123, Clause 3 of the Representation of the People's Act, way back in 1951. The law talked about that if I am a candidate, I'm contesting the election from a constituency. If I'm asking the people to vote for me because of my religion, if I'm asking the people not to vote for my opponent because of his religion, or his caste, or his race, or his community, or his language, this amounts to corrupt practice, and since it is a corrupt practice, you shall be disqualified from the house. But the original interpretation was, how do we define his? That means when the law talks about the appeal by a candidate or his agent to vote or refrain from voting for any person on the ground of his, whether this his means the candidate or the voter, whether you don't have to appeal to the religion of the candidate or the religion of the voter. This was the confusion initially. The previous interpretation of the Supreme Court was that this his means candidate. That means if I am the candidate, I cannot tell you, vote for me because I'm a Muslim. Do not vote for my opponent because he's a Hindu. You should not do that. This amounts to corrupt practice. Now, yesterday, in this landmark decision of the Supreme Court has said this his does not only mean candidate, it also means voter. That means you don't have to even ask the voters that their voters, because you are Hindus, I will be in a position to protect your interests, so you vote for me. So I don't have to appeal to the religion of the voters, to the religion of the polling agent as well. That means if I have someone who is my agent, who is my polling agent, who campaigns for me, even I can't ask for votes on the name of his religion or his caste or his community. Supreme Court said elections in India, and since India is a secular country, elections in India is a secular exercise. That means Supreme Court has upheld secularism in this country. And the secularism is part of the basic structure of Indian Constitution. Because we have witnessed in the past that the entire election exercise in India was corrupted. Mayawati was campaigning in Uttar Pradesh because of her Dalit identity. Vote for me because I'm a Dalit. Vote for me because I alone am in a position to safeguard the interest of the Dalit community in this country. There was someone called Asaduddin Owaisi who would ask for votes in the name of religion. There was a Congress party who went to Shahi Imam of Delhi and asked the Shahi Imam to issue a fatwa that all Muslims in this country should vote for a secular party called Indian National Congress. We saw this entire election was corrupted in this country. So if today after this judgment of the Supreme Court, no one can seek votes in the name of religion, race, caste, language, then ultimately the secularism principle, which is part of the basic structure of Indian Constitution, will be upheld. But the fact is, this section 123 clause 3 was there in the past as well. It was only that this section was not getting implemented rigorously. What the Supreme Court has done yesterday, it has merely expanded the definition of his. Nothing more, nothing less. So whether this judgment will be implementable, that is for all of us to see in the coming days. We will witness elections in Punjab, in Uttar Pradesh, then in Gujarat, and we will see whether this judgment will be implemented in the letter and the spirit as well. But then there is a problem as well. There is a problem with this judgment of the Supreme Court as well. What is the problem? There are three important problems. Number one, way back in 1960s, 1965 to be precise, in Jagdev Singh Siddhanti versus Pratap Singh Dolta, Supreme Court was looking into Article 29 of Indian Constitution, and we know Article 29 is a fundamental right. Article 29 talks about every section of citizens in this country who have a distinct language, script, or culture. Every section of the society who has a distinct language, script, or culture and wants to preserve this culture shall have the fundamental right to preserve this culture. That means Supreme Court said Article 29 clause 1 is an absolute fundamental right. That means the citizens in this country who want to preserve this culture, they have the fundamental right to conserve this culture. And Supreme Court in this judgment said, what do we mean by right to conserve? Right to conserve one's language, one's script, one's culture is that citizens have the right to agitate as well. That means political speeches for the conservation of language cannot be regarded as corrupt practice within the meaning of Section 123 Clause 3 of Representation of the People's Act. But now, today the Supreme Court is saying if you ask for vote in the name of language as well, that is a corrupt practice and you will be disqualified. But way back in the past, in 1965, in a landmark judgment of the Supreme Court said Article 29 Clause 1 is an absolute fundamental right. Every single citizen in this country who has a distinct language, script, or culture of its own and wants to conserve that culture, preserve that culture, they will have the fundamental right. That means political speeches for the conservation of language cannot be regarded as corrupt practice, but yesterday Supreme Court made even this a corrupt practice. But that's not the only problem. Another problem with this judgment is why Supreme Court has not revisited Hindutva judgment of 1995. What was this issue all about? Manohar Joshi of Shiv Sena, he campaigns for elections in Maharashtra, and he says that we want to establish a Hindu Rashtra in this country. Vote for us because only we will be in a position to establish Hindu Rashtra in this country. Matter went to the court. Supreme Court was asked, dear Supreme Court, this particular individual called Manohar Joshi is asking for votes in the name of religion, because he's saying that we will establish Hindutva, Hindu Rashtra in this country. Justice J.S. Verma, one of the best judges that India has witnessed after independence. Justice Verma gave a controversial judgment, which by all accounts he regretted later as well. Justice Verma said this is not a corrupt practice, because Manohar Joshi is asking for vote on the basis of Hindutva. And Hindutva is not a religion. Hindutva is a way of life. You look at Islam, you look at Christianity, you will see that they follow a particular book. They follow a particular principle, a particular set of principles. Muslims follow Quran, Christians follow New Testament, Jews follow Old Testament. So they have a specific book. But Hindus do not have a book. So that means Hinduism is not a religion. Hinduism is a way of life. Hindutva is a way of life. So if Manohar Joshi is asking for vote in the name of Hindutva, it is not a correct practice, because he is not asking for votes in the name of religion. But perhaps J.S. Verma, no one told J.S. Verma about V.D. Savarkar, who coined this term Hindutva. V.D. Savarkar said, anyone who is born in India, as well as whose religious land is India, only this individual is part of Indian community. Only this individual is a pure Indian. So there are Christians who may have been born in India, but their land of worship is outside India. There are Muslims who may be born in India, but their land of worship is outside India. These people are not 100% Indians. This particular individual, V.D. Savarkar, coined this term Hindutva. So someone should have told Justice J.S. Verma that what Manohar, so someone should have told Justice J.S. Verma that what the Shiv Sena leader is asking for is not Hindutva as a way of life. He's asking for Hindutva of V.D. Savarkar. But the Supreme Court has decided that no, we will not revisit this Hindutva judgment. Although later on Supreme Court clarified that we will continue hearing this Hindutva judgment, but we still do not know. But if Supreme Court said election is a secular exercise, and in this secular country, religion should have no place, what is secularism? Secularism means that all religions are to be treated equally in this country. If all religions are to be treated equally, why is Hinduism treated as a way of life and not Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism? So that means why in this secular India, one religion has been conferred with a higher status as against other religions? This is another flaw in this judgment. But not just this. There is a third flaw as well, which is a much, much deeper flaw in the judgment. Debate on religion or caste or language or creed, this is the affirmation of constitutionally protected values and an intrinsic part of freedom of speech and expression. You can debate your religion, you can debate your caste, you can have a full-fledged discussion on creed, race, everything, because that is your freedom of speech and expression. Imposing a prohibition on electoral discourse on issues which are pertaining to caste, race, community, it will reduce democracy to an abstraction. Why can't you debate religion in elections? Why can't you debate caste in elections? For example, why can't I say don't vote for BJP because of Rohit Vemula? Why can't I say don't vote for BJP because BJP is responsible for flogging of Dalits in Una? Why can't I say don't vote for Indian National Congress because it has done nothing for Muslims? It has only created a wedge in the Indian society. Why can't I speak in this language? This should be the discourse in the elections as well, because after all, we are talking about elections for all. Not just this. People have been discriminated on the grounds of religion. People have been discriminated on the grounds of caste. We saw the condition of untouchables, the Shudras in ancient India. It was only after independence that they were provided some level of dignity by the constitution. We have seen discrimination on the basis of language as well. There was a time when only the upper caste, the Brahmins, could read Sanskrit language. Not the Shudras, not even the women. That means religion, race, caste, language, all these are symbols of social discrimination. Very well. But these are also the symbols of social mobilization. That means to answer the culture, the centuries of injustice in this country, people have been mobilized on the basis of caste in this country. If today Dalits are able to seek a space in the state structure, in the power corridors, in Lok Sabha, Vidhan Sabha, judiciary, it is because they organize themselves as vote banks. Yes, as these vote banks, which is a much maligned word today. But that means the problem with this judgment is, number one, why can't Supreme Court go back to 1965, wherein it affirmed that the right to conserve one's script is that political speeches for the conservation of language cannot be regarded as corrupt practice. Why is it Supreme Court is not revisiting the Hindutva judgment? Why in India, where religion, caste, language are symbol of social discrimination, but at the same time, they are symbols of social mobilization as well. They are part of the central theme of Constitution to produce a just social order. That is why our Constitution talks about religion. Our Constitution talks about caste. Our Constitution talks about language. Yes, you should not ask for votes in the name of religion, but you can debate religion in the elections. Yes, you should not ask for votes saying, I am a Dalit and vote for me. But Dalit issues are an important feature of our democratic polity and must be debated in these elections. And in one single brush, the imminent impact of this judgment of the Supreme Court is that if I speak for the injustices meted out to Dalits, I will be construed that this individual is using caste in the election, disqualify this individual. If the law's premise is meant to be that politics on the basis of identity is all bad, then it betrays a lack of understanding of the hierarchies within India. Our society is a society of hierarchy. Our society is not a stratificational society. We are a hierarchical society. On the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, on the basis of language, there are hierarchies in our society, and we have to address these hierarchies. So these are some flaws with this judgment, but there are some people who vehemently welcome the judgment of the Supreme Court, saying that this judgment of the Supreme Court will bring an end to the identity politics in this country, communal politics in this country. But there are also others who say that this judgment is unimplementable. How is it unimplementable? Because if there was section 123 clause 3 in the past, the same section is today as well. Only the interpretation has changed. Only the interpretation has been widened. But let's see when the election will take place in Uttar Pradesh, what is going to be the impact of this judgment on our political parties. Let's wait and watch for that. So this was another issue that came to light in the Supreme Court. Let's look at another issue. Samajwadi Party is in a crisis. Samajwadi Party of the great wrestler Mulayam Singh Yadav, who single-handedly started this political party in the 90s and captured political power in Uttar Pradesh. This has also something to do with caste. OBCs, to which these Yadavs or Kumars belong, or Kurmis belong, these were marginalized. And it was only when they decided to mobilize themselves on the basis of caste that they were in a position to capture political power. If this judgment, which was given by the Supreme Court yesterday, if it was given in the 1970s or in the 1990s, then we would not have seen the assertion of the democratic rights of these other backward castes in our country. Yes, identity politics is bad, only to the extent that you are seeking vote primarily for that identity. But if you want to raise issues that concern a particular community, then you should be, in all likelihood, be allowed for that. But that's not a discussion now that we have discussed. Samajwadi Party is in the crisis. One group claims that Akhilesh Yadav is the head. Another group claims that Mulayam Singh Yadav is the head. This particular issue is not of much concern so far as your examination is concerned. But there are few important points that you will have to keep in mind. Number one, if a member of parliament or member of state legislature is expelled by the political party, such an individual is not disqualified under anti-defection law. So you're not disqualified if you are expelled from your political party. Similarly, in case there is a split, which group will be recognized as the real Samajwadi Party? How will this question be decided upon by Election Commission of India? Let's have a brief talk about that. Now, there is one group which is claiming to be a real Samajwadi Party. Akhilesh Yadav, his uncle Ram Gopal Yadav, they conducted a national convention. And in this national convention in Lucknow, they proclaimed that Akhilesh Yadav will be the national president of the Samajwadi Party. On the other hand, Mulayam Singh Yadav and his younger brother Shivpal Yadav decided to expel Ram Gopal Yadav, saying that we are the real Samajwadi Party. The question is over cycle, the symbol of Samajwadi Party. Which political party or which group will get this symbol? Election Commission will look into, number one, the test of majority. That means, what is the percentage of legislators who support one group or the other? Going by that majority, they can determine and decide that a particular group or faction which commands the majority in legislature is the real group, which in this case appears Akhilesh Yadav's group, because he commands majority of more than 80-90% of the legislators, both in Lok Sabha as well as in Rajya Sabha, as well as in the State Legislative Assembly and Council. If not the test of majority, Election Commission will also look into the constitution of Samajwadi Party. Here is where Mulayam Singh Yadav will have an edge over his son. If you look at clause 2 of section 14 of the constitution of Samajwadi Party, This section explicitly states that national convention meeting can only be called by the national president, which in this case is Mulayam Singh Yadav. That means if a national convention is to be called for, where important decisions regarding the political party will be taken, this national convention will be only called by the national president, and this decision cannot be challenged in any court of law. Similarly, this national convention will be chaired by the national president. Although we don't have to get into much detail regarding this, but primarily, if the question involves which group or which fraction or which faction of a political party will get that symbol, two tests will be conducted by Election Commission. Number one, test of majority. Which faction commands the majority of the legislators of that political party? Second test will be on the basis of the constitution of that political party. What is that the constitution of that political party is talking about indiscipline? What are the penalties for indiscipline? Whether the expulsion of Akhilesh Yadav and Ram Gopal Yadav was within the constitution of Samajwadi Party or not. All these things will be taken care of, and ultimately the Election Commission will give its verdict. But the only issue here is that Election Commission takes a very, very long time. And what Election Commission can do? Election Commission can freeze this election symbol, which in this case is cycle. That means this symbol of cycle will be frozen. This cycle symbol will not be given either to Mulayam Singh faction or Akhilesh Yadav faction. That means both these factions will be given separate symbols on the basis of which they will contest the election. So this is all that you need to know regarding the political party when they split. This happened in Andhra Pradesh as well, in the erstwhile undivided Andhra Pradesh. We saw NTR, N.T. Ramarao, he started Telugu Desam Party or TDP, and he won the election thrice. But towards the end of his chief ministership, NTR's health was failing him, and he was also under the influence of a particular lady. And by all accounts, this lady, ultimately NTR married this lady after some point of time. But even before marriage, this lady has a considerable impact on the NTR government. And everybody was saying that NTR government is run by his particular lady. This is where the son-in-law of NTR, Chandrababu Naidu, comes into picture. He captures the political party, and majority of the political party, including the cadres and the legislators, favored Chandrababu Naidu, and ultimately Chandrababu Naidu-led faction was recognized by Election Commission as the real TDP. So the intention here is that sometimes test of majority will play an important role, sometimes the constitution of that party will play an important role. But in any case, this decision lies exclusively with the Election Commission of India. Once the Election Commission of India gives its judgment, then you can file an appeal before the Supreme Court or the High Court concerned. Now let's look at another issue, another bombshell of the Supreme Court, and that dealt with the President of Board of Control for Cricket in India. Mr. Anurag Thakur was expelled. He lost his position, as well as the Secretary of Board of Control for Cricket in India. Over the past many decades, we have seen that BCCI is functioning like a family fiefdom. select group of politicians, select group of bureaucrats are controlling the organization of BCCI and various state associations in this country. For outsiders, there is no place. BCCI did not even allow an association of the players, a players union as well. Then came Indian Premier League. And Indian Premier League became the cash cow for BCCI. Because of media blitzkrieg, because of advertisements, revenue was swollen, and ultimately BCCI became the richest sports body in this world. And it wielded considerable influence not only in India but also over International Cricket Council. To such a degree that when India was playing any other country in this world, DRS was not allowed. Decision review system was not allowed. That means BCCI wielded considerable influence over International Cricket Council, over many other international councils as well. There also came a time when BCCI colluded with the Cricket Association of England, the Cricket Association of Australia, and they decided that bulk of the revenue will be distributed amongst these three cricket associations, and the poorer nations were left out. When IPL was going on, there were numerous instances of conflict of interest as well. Mr. Srinivasan, he was the president of BCCI. He was head of India Cements. But because he was the head of BCCI, he was also in a position to bid for Chennai Super Kings. Don't you think that there is a conflict of interest? There is one individual who is head of BCCI. He is also the head of India Cements. And this India Cements captures one of the franchisees of Indian Premier League called Chennai Super Kings. This brazen conflict of interest was rendered null and void. That means everybody turned a blind eye towards this conflict of interest. But this became even more cringeworthy when the son-in-law of N. Srinivasan, Gurunath Mayappan, he was actively involved in betting in the matches of Indian Premier League. Not only Gurunath Mayappan, but Vindu Dara Singh, the ex-Big Boss contestant. Not only Vindu Dara Singh, but we also saw Raj Kundra, who was the part owner of Rajasthan Royals. They were also involved in betting. So this cricket, which was viewed as a gentleman's game, this cricket and the superstar cricketers are viewed as gods in this country. This was seen in a very, very poor and bad light by the spectators in this country, by the lovers of cricket in this country. This is where Supreme Court came into picture. And Supreme Court appointed 3-member committee headed by former Chief Justice of India, Justice R.M. Lodha, to suggest what reforms should be inculcated into BCCI, how BCCI's constitution can be changed, how the conflict of interest and these illegal betting can be stopped. Ultimately, Justice Lodha came up with series of recommendations, and these series of recommendations were not acceptable to BCCI. And in July last year, Supreme Court said that all these recommendations of Justice Lodha Committee will have to be implemented, and time was given to BCCI to implement these recommendations, but ultimately BCCI was defiant, and they paid the price of this defiance when President and the Secretary were dismissed from BCCI by the Supreme Court. What were these recommendations? and why BCCI was reluctant to accept these recommendations. Let's have a look at them very briefly. Lodha panel had recommended that all those office bearers of BCCI and state cricket associations must not be over 70 years of age. BCCI feared that if this rule was implemented, many state associations would lose their top officials. Sharad Pawar, Niranjan Shah, N. Srinivasan. Ultimately, BCCI decided we will not implement it. Lodha panel also said that no official could serve 3 consecutive terms, either at BCCI or a state body. And between 2 terms, there has to be a cooling off period. And cooling off period of 3 years. I'm holding a post in BCCI or a state cricket association for 3 years, then I can't hold a second consecutive term. There has to be a cooling off period between the 2 terms. BCCI had a very peculiar policy. What peculiar policy? In Maharashtra and Gujarat, there were 3 local associations. And all these 3 associations were given 1 vote each. That means from Gujarat, 3 votes were there. From Maharashtra, there were 3 votes. But there were lesser, smaller states which were having only 1 vote in the meetings of the BCCI. Lodha committee said this is also very bad. Let's have 1 state, 1 vote policy. This was also not acceptable to BCCI because then powerful cricket associations like Maharashtra and Gujarat would lose their voice. Lodha committee also said there should be a CAG in the panel. CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General. That means the accounts of the BCCI should be audited by the CAG. Now, whether you may agree with this or disagree with this, but this was a recommendation of the Lodha committee. BCCI said, we are a private organization. We are not a public body. So why is there a need for a CAG? We will not accept this. Lodha committee also said, let BCCI come under right to information. BCCI said, we won't accept. Lodha committee also said, and this is something very controversial, no commercials during live matches. Lodha panel ironically recommended no commercial breaks during live cricket matches. And BCCI rightly said that this will result in substantial revenue loss. And ultimately, they did not accept this. When all these recommendations of the Lodha panel were not acceptable and were not accepted by BCCI, Supreme Court took the drastic step and ultimately dismissed the president and the secretary for their obstructionism, and ultimately decided that we will appoint a panel, and this panel will decide who will be the administrator of the BCCI, so that the new administrator would implement all the reforms that are recommended by the Lodha committee. What do you think? Is this judicial activism or judicial overreach? BCCI is recognized under Tamil Nadu Societies Act, so it's not a public body. It is not state within the meaning of Article 13 of Indian Constitution. So how can you appoint CAG to BCCI? How can you bring a private organization within right to information? How can you suggest that you cannot have commercial breaks during live television matches? The fact is, look at the state of Olympics in our country. wrestling, boxing, badminton, tennis, all these gymnastics. Our country is performing abysmally in all these competitions. And if there is a shining light anywhere in this world from India, it is because of cricket. Because cricket has been professionally administered and maintained by BCCI. Now, judiciary, because of its judicial overreach, is trying to encroach into the only sport which is working perfectly well in Indian circumstances. So it clearly is judicial overreach. But then if judiciary has committed overreach, the only institution to be blamed for this is not judiciary but BCCI. Because BCCI for all these years was in denial. BCCI was working in such opaque systems that an outsider was not allowed to enter. For years and years, 70, 80-year-olds were running this institution. It was a nexus of politicians, corrupt bureaucrats, and former cricketers, and ultimately the prestige of cricket in the eyes of the commoners was taken a beating. So if anyone is to be blamed for the mess that has been created today, it is none other than BCCI. And this should also serve as a wake-up call to other sports bodies in this country, particularly all men golf clubs in this country, where women are not allowed. This should serve as a wake-up call for these sports bodies. Fall in line, uphold the integrity, conduct all your transactions in a transparent manner, and ultimately you will be saved the sword of the judiciary in this country. Otherwise, judiciary will take over and will install its own administrators to run that organization. Not only this, now perjury proceedings will go on against Anurag Thakur. There is a concept under ICC that if any national sports body or national cricket body is under government interference, government inference, then that body will be de-recognized by ICC. Anurag Thakur, as the president of BCCI, wrote a letter to Shashank Manohar, who is the head of ICC. He told Shashank Manohar that you tell the Supreme Court of India that if Lodha committee recommendations are accepted by BCCI, then it would amount to government interference and ICC will not conduct business with BCCI. When this matter came to light before the Supreme Court asked Anurag Thakur, is this true or wrong? Anurag Thakur said, no, this is completely false. I have not written any letter to ICC president. ICC president, in writing, is telling the Supreme Court of India that yes, Anurag Thakur did indeed write to ICC saying that you please confirm and inform the Supreme Court that if these Lodha committee recommendations are accepted, it would amount to government interference and we will not conduct business with you then. Since Anurag Thakur has prima facie lied on oath, it amounts to perjury, which carries a maximum prison sentence of 7 years, and these perjury proceedings will continue against Anurag Thakur. So this was another issue, a very high-profile issue which was decided upon by the Supreme Court, and this is all that you need to know regarding the Lodha panel. Let me give you a 2-minute break so that you can brush it up and you can note down the important points that we have mentioned. So let's look at another issue. Global Wage Report 2016-17 by International Labour Organization. It came up with a report that India has the worst levels of gender wage disparity. That means men are earning more than women in similar jobs. And sometimes this gap is exceeding 30%. So in your GS paper 1 social issue segment, whenever a question on women's issues is asked, you can write this important statement in your answers. That means India has worse levels of gender wage disparity. Men are earning more than women in similar jobs, and this gap is exceeding 30% as well. That means not only are women paid less, that means there are fewer women in highly paid occupations as well. This is according to the Global Wage Report 2016-17 by International Labour Organization. Let's look at something else. On 1st of January 2017, India and Pakistan exchanged through diplomatic channels the list of nuclear installations and facilities. Let's go back a bit. 1981, Israeli Air Force conducted a surprise attack on Iraqi nuclear program. So there was a surprise mounted attack on Iraqi nuclear program which crippled Iraq's nuclear weapons program. India and Pakistan also realized that if there is a sudden strike by either side on each other's nuclear installations and facilities, what will we do? That will cripple our nuclear program forever. So in 1988, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi and his Pakistani counterpart, Benazir Bhutto, they signed an agreement. This agreement came to be known as Agreement on Prohibition of Attack against Nuclear Installations. That means both India and Pakistan will share a list with each other. In this list, there will be the names and addresses of the nuclear installations in this country. And ultimately, if either side would attack this particular list, that would mean you have launched a first strike. And then the other country will have the right to retaliate. What is the purpose? That means in 1988, this agreement was signed between India and Pakistan. Under this agreement, a list will be exchanged by both India and Pakistan. And both India and Pakistan will take a pledge that we will not attack these installations. Not only will we not attack these installations, we will not also assist foreign powers to attack each other's nuclear installations and facilities. This was the background, and this came into effect from the year 1991. And from January 1992, the list has been extended, and on January 1st, 2017, for the 26th time, this list was exchanged between India and Pakistan. But something, it has a relationship with India's no first use policy. And often this question has been asked, why is it that India has abided by no first use policy? Why have we made it absolutely clear that we will not be the first nation to use its nuclear weapons against a foreign enemy country? If we look at the nuclear weapons test that was conducted in the year 1998, we declared it openly. We publicly declared that this was a nuclear weapons test. In 1974, when Pokhran first was conducted, when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, when the nuclear test was conducted, we said this is a peaceful nuclear test. In a sense, we were fooling the international community. They knew that this is a nuclear weapons test, but we did not declare it openly. We did not declare it publicly that this was a nuclear weapons test. We said that this was a nuclear test for civilian purposes, for meaningful purposes. But in 1998, when under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Pokhran 2 was conducted, for the first time, India publicly tested nuclear weapons. We made it absolutely clear to the public that we have conducted nuclear weapons test. After that test was done, a no first use policy, this doctrine, was issued by the then NDA government. The fundamental purpose of India's nuclear weapons is to deter the use and threat of use of nuclear weapons. That means if we look at the text of this no first use policy, it says what is the purpose? Why did India conduct this nuclear test? We conducted this nuclear test so that we can deter others that they should not use their nuclear weapons against us. We conducted this nuclear test so that the other countries should not even threaten us with nuclear weapons. That means these nuclear weapons, the fundamental purpose of these nuclear weapons is to deter the use and threat of use of nuclear weapons by any state against India. This no first use policy also makes it clear that India will not be the first to initiate a nuclear strike. But if a nuclear strike is launched against us, we will respond with retaliation. We will respond with so much punitive action that you will remember it. That means India will not use nuclear weapons for the first time. This nuclear no first use policy also talks about that we will not even threaten nuclear weapons against those states which do not possess nuclear weapons, or against those states which are not aligned with nuclear weapon powers. This is what is India's nuclear no first use policy. But there is still anxiety in India about the wisdom of this commitment, particularly amongst the military minds. These military minds ask a fundamental question: why have a weapon and forswear its use? Why is it that we have a weapon in the first place, but we are making it clear that we will not use it in the first place? What is the logic? These military minds tell us that we should have followed United States or Pakistan. United States and Pakistan make it absolutely clear that we can use nuclear weapons even for the first time as well. We will initiate nuclear weapons if our country's defense requires it. Unlike India, which has said that we will not be the first to initiate nuclear weapons. Then what is the purpose of having this nuclear no first use doctrine? Let's go back to the late 90s. India was in a situation where two of its neighbors, with whom India had fought wars after independence, countries like Pakistan and China, they were already armed with nuclear weapons. And both Pakistan as well as China were working together to build their capabilities. Indian government made the decision in the face of opposition by all major powers that we will conduct these nuclear tests. And we conducted these nuclear tests openly in 1998. If we look at since 1974, India has been threatened with nuclear weapons at least 3 times. 3 times we were threatened that we will bomb you with nuclear weapons. Twice by Pakistan and once by United States. Although Pakistani threat was explicit, United States threat was implicit. How implicit? In 1971 war with Pakistan, United States USS Enterprise entered into Bay of Bengal. And this USS Enterprise is a nuclear armed US aircraft carrier. So 1974 onwards, we were threatened with nuclear weapons, twice explicitly by Pakistan, once implicitly when this USS Enterprise entered into Bay of Bengal with nuclear weapons. So it was a threat to India. Then India decided to test nuclear weapons publicly in 1998. It was evident when India conducted the nuclear tests that these nuclear weapons are political weapons. They cannot be military weapons because they cause mass destruction whenever they are used. So these nuclear weapons that we have, these are political weapons. These are political weapons of deterrence. And we have seen after 1998, when we publicly announced that we are a nuclear weapon state, the threat of nuclear weapons against us has never been used. That means, in other words, India has nuclear weapons for the contribution that they make in national security. We are living in an uncertain world. We are living in an anarchic world. That means we are preventing others from attempting nuclear blackmail and coercion against India. That is why we have nuclear weapons. And these nuclear weapons, as I said, has served expected purpose. We have never been blackmailed after that. And globally, there is a huge respect for India because of this nuclear no first use policy. Globally, there is huge respect for India because we follow nuclear non-proliferation. Although India is not a signatory to NPT, but we have never transferred this nuclear technology to other countries. Pakistan gave this technology to Iran. Pakistan gave this technology, some say, to North Korea as well. China has given this technology to Pakistan. That means all these countries have a track record of proliferating weapons of mass destruction. But India, on the other hand, is held with esteem globally because of this nuclear no first use policy, as well as the fact that India has a proven track record of nuclear non-proliferation. This was about nuclear no first use policy. Let's look at something else. A performance on health outcomes. This index was launched by Niti Aayog along with Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. What Niti Aayog tells us? That we will conduct regional workshops throughout this country. And in these regional workshops, what are the measures that are to be taken into account? What are the features of this index? How the data is to be submitted? All this information we will tell the states. Niti Aayog tells us that this performance index has been developed over several months, and we have taken inputs from both domestic as well as international experts. But the biggest significance of this index is this. Initially, what the governments used to do, governments would focus on historical achievements. For example, WHO has now decided and declared that India is a polio-free country. And this was given free press time and media time by the political party. Niti Aayog says that instead of focusing on these historical achievements, why can't we capture annual incremental improvements? If the government is focusing on the fact that we are a polio-free country, why is government not telling us the data every year about what is the situation of under 5 mortality rate in this country, infant mortality rate in this country? So ultimately, Niti Aayog wants to capture all this annual incremental improvement. That means it is meant to capture annual incremental improvements rather than focus on historical achievements. But how will this health index help India or help the states? This is the index. When annual improvements will be positioned on this index, states will be assisted to monitor this performance, and ultimately, based on the rank of a particular state on this index, they will be provided incentives. That means if a state is performing better in creating a change in the health scenario in this country, if the state is performing better in a sense that the performance in reducing the abnormalities in the health sector is done gratefully by a particular state, more incentives will be provided. That means this index will serve as a platform on the basis of which incentives will be provided to the state. And when every year all these health parameters will be measured, ultimately what will happen? Citizens' expectations will be met. That means one thing, this index will help the states in evaluating their performance on a daily basis, on an annual basis. And also the ranking in this index will provide incentives to the states. That means it will provide more impetus to the states that they will perform really well in the health sector. And if they perform really well in the health sector, more incentives will be provided to them. So it will give an encouragement to the states to improve their health determinants. And ultimately, the winner is a citizen of this country whose expectations will be met after this. Let's look at something else. A leap second was added to the Indian clock, which delayed the year 2017 by 1 second. Why was it done? To compensate for a slowdown in Earth's rotation. Now, this is something that you must have read in your geography classes, or your geography tablet would cover this. Just to revise it, the Earth rotates. It rotates around its own axis, but this rotation is not regular. Sometimes it speeds up, sometimes it slows down. Why? There are various factors responsible for this. Earthquakes, moon's gravitational forces, for example, and we know that these moon's gravitational forces also result in tides. So because the Earth and rotation around its axis is not regular, because sometimes it speeds up, sometimes it slows down because of various factors. As a result of this, astronomical time, it gradually falls out of sync with atomic time. You would know the difference between astronomical time and atomic time. That's part of your geography. So that means because of this wobbling of the Earth, because of the slowdown in the Earth's rotation, astronomical time falls out of sync with atomic time. Researchers say whenever the difference between atomic time and astronomical time, it approaches 0.9 second, then a leap second is added to the atomic time. And this is added to the atomic clocks worldwide. That means there is a slowdown in the Earth's rotation because of various factors. Ultimately, what happens? Astronomical time gradually falls out of sync with atomic time. And as and when the difference between the two approaches 0.9 seconds, a leap second is added to UTC through atomic clocks worldwide. In India, adding a leap second to the Indian clock is done by National Physics Laboratory, and this National Physics Laboratory comes under CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. And since 1972, 36 leap seconds have been added. So this was another important news that came in the last week, which has an important relevance and significance in your prelims examination. Prime Minister Modi addressed the nation for the second time. The first time he announced demonetization of 500 and 1,000 denomination notes, and the second time 31st December 2016. It was expected that Prime Minister Modi will talk about exactly how much amount of money was injected back into the banking sector. How many crores or lakhs of crores of rupees whose liability will be extinguished by RBI because this money did not come back into the banking system. But Prime Minister did not talk about all these things. In fact, Prime Minister Modi presented a pre-budget speech wherein many new schemes were launched, many new incentives were provided. Under the Prime Minister Awas Yojana, 2 new schemes were launched. Home loans for poor and middle class people up to 9 lakh rupees will get 4% tax interest exemption. That means if you are from poor or middle class society and you want a house loan or housing loan for 9 lakh rupees, you will get 4% exemption there on interest. If you are asking for a loan of up to 12 lakh rupees, then you will get a 3% exemption on interest. So this was for poor and middle class people. For farmers, Prime Minister Modi announced that there will be 60-day interest waiver. If a farmer has taken loan from district cooperative bank or societies, for those loans you have to pay interest. For 60 days, this interest will be waived off, says Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister Modi also says that government will convert 3 crore Kisan cards into RuPay credit cards. Prime Minister Modi also announced that senior citizens who have deposited money in the bank up to 7.5 lakh rupees of their denomination or their deposit, they will get an interest of 8%. All these are important or fairly important for your prelims examination, nothing more. For pregnant women, Prime Minister Modi says, across India, 6,000 rupees will be deposited in their bank accounts to take care of their medical needs. Although this was not a new program of Prime Minister Modi, this was a statutory obligation for the government. Because under Food Security Act, the pregnant women are to be paid 6,000 rupees annually for their medical needs. So this was another important announcements that were made by the Prime Minister Modi in his speech. The government also announced yesterday that service charge will not be leveled if you are not satisfied with the service. Here comes the difference. What is the difference between service tax and service charge? Service tax is a tax that is imposed by the center on the services, but service charge is like an additional tip. The tip that you are giving to a restaurant. But there are many restaurants in this country which include the service charge in their own bill. That means the bill which is presented to you will have service tax as well as service charge. And sometimes the service charge is in the range of 5 to 20%. Now the government has come up with a statement saying that this service charge is now optional. If you are dissatisfied with the service provided by a particular restaurant, then there is no need for you to pay this service charge. Let's look at the last issue that we will be covering in this lecture. International Solar Alliance. The cabinet has given the approval, the formal approval to International Solar Alliance. What is this International Solar Alliance? It is an alliance of more than 120 countries, and most of these countries are sunshine countries. And which are these sunshine countries? Those countries which come either completely or partly between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. That means International Solar Alliance, an alliance of more than 120 countries, and most of these countries are sunshine countries. Sunshine countries are those countries which come either completely or partly between the two tropics, Tropic of Capricorn and Tropic of Cancer. The primary objective of this alliance is that solar energy should be exploited, so that we want to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Since these are light-rich countries where the solar light is dominant, so you want to exploit efficiently the solar energy so that we reduce the dependence on these fossil fuels. In November 2015, Prime Minister Modi gave a speech, and in that speech he talked about this International Solar Alliance. And when India-Africa Summit was held, and a meeting of the member countries ahead of 2015 climate change conference that took place in Paris, this initiative was launched. And this initiative will be headquartered in India. In Gurgaon, the headquarters of this International Solar Alliance is situated. And the focus is on that we will maximize the utility of solar power so that our dependence on fossil fuels will be reduced. Because if we look at India, India has pledged to the Paris Summit. Paris Conference on Climate Change. India has pledged that 40% of our electricity generation, the capacity from non-fossil fuel sources, will be reduced by the year 2030. What is the intention here? The intention here is India's pledge to the Paris Summit. That means 40% of our electricity generation capacity will come from non-fossil fuel sources. And the most important non-fossil fuel source is the solar energy. And that is why last webinar we also talked about Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission, which was launched with this intention that we want to be energy rich. We want to explore the renewable sources of energy, particularly the solar energy. That is all that you need to know. We have covered all the important issues of the past week, and the remaining issues for which no explanation is required is mentioned in your notes. I hope all of you have received your notes. If not, please send a mail across and you will be getting all these notes. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.